What if I told you one of the biggest Call of Duty maps ever made may have just been found inside COD Mobile itself, not a rumor, not a fake concept, actual files, inside the test server. And if these discoveries are real, then COD Mobile might be preparing for the biggest Battle Royale change in its history. Because right now, the community is starting to realize something terrifying. The developers may have been preparing for this much longer than we thought. So here's where everything started. Last month, my friend and Bilibili creator, Imotem, spent nearly 2 hours digging through COD Mobile emulator test files using Assets Studio. At first, nothing looked unusual, just normal textures, random environment assets, standard test server stuff. But then suddenly, he started finding references connected to Verdansk, and not just one or two small assets. We're talking about multiple structures, from completely different areas of the map. North sections, south sections, interiors, exteriors, large buildings, recognizable locations. And that's when the entire situation changed. Because small reused assets are normal in game development, but full environmental coverage across multiple regions? That becomes much harder to explain away. Now for people who don't know, Verdansk was not just another Call of Duty map. It was the Warzone map, the map that exploded during 2020, the map that defined an entire era of Battle Royale gaming. Later it evolved into Verdansk, 1984. Then parts of it returned again during the Warzone 2 period. Even Warzone Mobile heavily relied on Verdansk as its main attraction from the earliest limited tests all the way to launch. And ironically, that's exactly why these new discoveries feel so unbelievable. Because after Warzone, Mobile struggled badly with player numbers, optimization, and revenue. Activision slowly pulled back support. Then, earlier this year, the servers officially shut down. So naturally, when people first saw these CODM leaks, most assumed the same thing. Probably leftover Warzone Mobile assets. Maybe ground war files. Maybe experimental content. That would make sense. Except for one problem. The amount of assets reportedly found was simply too complete. And that detail changes everything. Because according to discussions from last year's developer Open Day event, there were already talks internally about a future large-scale BR map, eventually replacing Isolated. At the time, most people ignored it. Some thought it was impossible. Others assumed CODM's engine could never handle something that large. But now, suddenly all those old conversations are starting to look very different. And honestly, when you look back at COD Mobile's recent updates, it almost feels like pieces of a bigger puzzle. Think about it carefully. Krai introduced denser city environments. The 1985 version of Isolated added larger elevation changes and more complex terrain flow. Rebirth Island showed how closely CODM could recreate Warzone-style map design while still keeping mobile optimization in mind. Individually, these updates look normal, but together, it starts feeling less random, almost like the developers have been stress testing systems for something much bigger in the background. And that possibility becomes even harder to ignore when you remember how fast Rebirth Island arrived after Warzone Mobile started collapsing. That timing still feels suspicious. What makes this even crazier is that this would not be the first time old CODM file discoveries eventually became reality. Years ago, players reportedly found references to DM-style systems and Warzone-inspired mechanics buried inside older builds. At the time, people laughed at those leaks too, but slowly, feature after feature actually started appearing. And now, here we are again, looking at another situation that sounds impossible until the files themselves start showing up. But this is where the conversation becomes dangerous, because bringing Verdansk to COD Mobile is not just about hype, it's about survival. Warzone Mobile already proved something very important. You cannot simply force PC and console systems onto mobile devices and expect everything to work. And honestly, optimization was only part of the disaster. The real issue was that the gameplay systems themselves demanded too much from phones. Too many resources, too much heat, too much instability. That's why CODM's current BR structure actually feels smarter. The class system, the pacing, the movement balance, the way Rebirth Island was redesigned for mobile accessibility. Everything feels intentionally controlled. The developers clearly understand mobile limitations far better now. But Verdansk? That would still be the biggest challenge COD Mobile has ever attempted. And considering maps like Krai and even Rebirth Island still struggle on some devices compared to older CODM maps, the pressure would be enormous. Because if optimization fails again, players will immediately compare it to Warzone Mobile, and that comparison could become very ugly very fast. Now, while all this Verdansk discussion was happening, another leak suddenly started spreading through the Chinese community, and this one involves zombies. After recently finishing his move, another Bilibili creator named KH shared screenshots asking whether COD Mobile zombies might finally receive major updates and new animations during this year's anniversary. And once again, the information supposedly traces back to Scott. Now, this is where people need to stay careful, because Scott has a very mixed history. Some of his leaks became real, others never happened. Last year he mentioned things like Rebirth Island, M4 reworks, and multiple future maps. Some of those predictions later turned out true. Rebirth Island happened. The M4 changes eventually appeared. Several unusual weapons are also reportedly coming, but other claims, especially Urzikstan, still never arrived. So blindly believing everything would be a mistake. And honestly, COD Mobile Zombies has always had development problems behind the scenes. Years ago, when Zombies was still actively supported, developers from MP and BR teams were reportedly shifted internally just to help maintain the mode. Even PvE projects like White Aurora reportedly faced resource issues. That's the hidden reality many players don't see. Creating large-scale PvE content inside a live service mobile game is extremely expensive, especially when the game itself is free to play. And from what I personally know, direct involvement from major Call of Duty studios reportedly became less common after the Warzone Mobile era started, which means TiMi likely had to handle far more internally afterward. Interestingly, Scott later explained that most of his information supposedly comes from marketing side contacts instead of direct developers. And honestly, that creates another layer of uncertainty, because official community figures have publicly denied some of his claims before, which is exactly why my opinion has not changed. Be cautiously optimistic, not blindly hyped, and definitely not blindly negative either. Because right now, something strange is clearly happening inside COD Mobile. The BR direction is changing. The map design philosophy is changing. The scale of updates is changing. And now, suddenly, Verdansk files are reportedly appearing inside the test server at the exact moment CODM seems more ambitious than ever before. Maybe it leads nowhere. Maybe these are old experimental leftovers. Or maybe we are watching the early stages of the biggest Battle Royale transition COD Mobile has ever attempted. But until Activision officially confirms anything, treat every leak carefully. Do not turn speculation into fake confirmation. Because honestly, that habit has already damaged the COD Mobile community enough. And if there's one lesson this entire situation should teach people, it's this. Sometimes the most dangerous leaks are not the fake ones. It's the ones that look just believable enough to become impossible to ignore. Thank you for watching, Legends. Stay safe, stay sharp, and I'll see you in the next one.